Well, Darbar Gopal Das Desai, this Prince of Gujarat, born in 1887, died in 1951, was one of the most unusual men that Gujarat, indeed India, has seen. Completely unforgettable man and totally forgotten. So I felt that I had to present him because his story is just too interesting. He was a prince at a time when princes were autocrats and did horrible things to their subjects and often to their families. They treated women very badly. But this man was utterly unusual. He had witnessed some terrible experiences in his own circle, so he knew that princely life was not really romantic, it was often cruel. And the result was that he decided that he would give a new kind of picture of what princes could be like, should be like, the way he treated his subjects, especially the way he treated women, the respect that he got everybody to show them, the way he treated the Dalits, the way he treated the Muslims. So he was, in every possible way, the opposite of the image of the harsh, cruel, oppressive prince. And then his entire estate was confiscated by the British. He was the only prince in Gujarat whose principality was seized by the British because he entered the freedom movement. Nobody else did. No other prince, as far as I know, even in the whole of India, certainly not in Gujarat, Saurashtra, lost his principality because of the stand he took. So Prince became a pauper overnight. And the way he accepted this new life was also quite extraordinary. He went to prison many times, he led many satyagrahas in Gujarat. Instead of wanting office for himself, he developed other people, and many of the well-known people in Gujarat regard him as their mentor. And yet this extraordinary man has been forgotten, so because he was not a publicity conscious man. And it's really the publicity mania that has elbowed him out. So, but now, luckily, people will know his story. But he was an exception. Undoubtedly, he was the sole exception in the whole of Saurashtra and Gujarat, where there were scores and scores of very influential princes who continue to be influential, their descendants. So that's a very important point, which enables us to recognize that the Indian independence movement took courage. It wasn't as if all of India rose up in revolt and everyone who rose up in revolt was found life comfortable, convenient, or became popular. No, it wasn't like that at all. Because the establishment was very much there and most people wanted to go along with the establishment. Family. He has several descendants living. They've been the primary source. They provided an incredible amount of information. Fortunately, when his property was seized in 1922, a remarkable man who was a colleague of his in the freedom movement wrote a biography of this man until that stage, so where his childhood and boyhood stories are also recorded. So this is a very precious source of information. Yeah, this was in Gujarati, and this is no longer, even in libraries, not available. Just a few copies are around, but I was able to get that. But it's the family that has supplied most of the information. Yes, well, it is letters, some correspondence. Also, when I was able also to go to the Rajkot Records Office, where the records of many of the princes are kept and how the British officers treated those princes. That was a very valuable and important source for me, the Rajkot Records Office, in connection with this particular principality. Shortly after he died, luckily, somebody in his part of Gujarat, in Vaso, not far from Baroda, also managed to get old colleagues of his to write their reminiscences of his early life. And these records also throw a good deal of light, and of course they are personal memories. They're not corroborated by documentary evidence, but they do tell us a good deal about his early life. Some, if you have letters or if you have newspaper statements of the time, newspaper articles of the time, you know, when he became a pauper from being a prince and his property was confiscated in 1922, he became actually, apart from Gandhiji, the most famous man in the whole of Gujarat at the time. Even Vallabhbhai Patel was not so well known at that time. Vallabhbhai Patel's daughter Maniben wrote in a journal at that time that this man is a Harishchandra for our age. Now this was her statement. It's a recorded statement. But where it's not a document, where it's not a recorded statement or a letter, if somebody else is either telling me the story, a family member, or somebody else told the story which is recorded, I say that so and so related this. I'm not saying this is a fact. It's not something that's corroborated, but this is what X, Y, or Z said at that particular time. So I'm always informing the reader that this is what has been said. I'm not vouching for the complete accuracy of it, but this is what has been said. You know, I'm not an objective enough student of the methodology that different historians adopt. I wish I could answer for everybody. I can only speak for myself that my effort has always been to provide as much corroboration as possible, to provide as much written evidence as possible, documentary evidence of the time, but where that is not available and where you rely on recollections can often contain some errors. So I must inform the reader of the fact. So beyond that, I don't know whether I can comment on how the methodology of writing history has been changing. It's not a subject I've studied. I can only tell you about my own experiments. No, I think that's a very important point. These precious records are there in London, and they used to be more easily accessible in the past. Now they're a little less easily accessible. I've often been to the India Office Library, which is now part of the British Library. But it's important, even although it's very important to have access to those papers, and if possible, if those can be brought to India, but then which part of India? They'll have to be taken to several parts of India because scholars all across India are interested in that period. But in addition to that, we must recognize that even these documents, although they are written documents, they can be seen, they can be inspected, felt, but they don't necessarily tell the full truth, because these are also documents written by people who had a certain attitude, maybe a certain interest, a certain in making some things available, in suppressing other information. So we should not treat, these are very precious documents, but we should not regard those as our only source of the ultimate truth. That would be quite an error.